Pain in this life is not avoidable, but the pain we create avoiding pain is avoidable. R.D. Lang.
Bending, Not Breaking, the live action episodes. Episode 2, Warriors. And we're back for another episode of Bending, Not Breaking. I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And we are here
to talk about Warriors.
Episode 2 of Netflix's the live action
NATLA
episodes.
Yeah, we're doing it.
And we're taking a little trip to Kyoshi Island.
Kyoshi Island. The new Yokoya port evolved into Kyoshi Island. Woohoo!
Talk to me a little bit about your quote.
Pain in this life is not avoidable, but the pain we create avoiding pain is avoidable. Yes, that is a thing.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, we are human, right?
That is true.
We're human.
Well, we assume.
I mean, maybe dogs are listening.
Maybe there could be extraterrestrials on this earth.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, there could be cats listening. There could be your pets might be. Anyway, we assume that the target audience for this is human.
Not necessarily. If people can pull something from these episodes, human or not, we want them to.
We want you to listen no matter what kind of person you are, human or otherwise.
But specifically with humans, what do you have to say about it?
Humans in particular, perhaps, are going to experience pain. Whether that be emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, we are going to experience pain because this is the life we live, right? And some people some people experience more pain than others, kind of like the pain that I just experienced when he did that. But we experience pain, but oftentimes what happens is we anticipate pain. And because we anticipate pain, we do everything possible to try to not experience that. And when we avoid it, we then think we're being successful at not feeling pain, but often what it does is create a different kind of pain.
Which is interesting because we kind of talked about this a little last episode.
Did we?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about what it means to not hope. Remember when we were talking about Zuko?
Yeah.
And so this kind of, when watching this episode, it was kind of like, this is everything we were talking about then.
It's as if we can learn and from our build on what we've learned in the past. Isn't that neat? That's a cool thing, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah. So if you haven't figured it out, the lens is avoidance.
Avoidance.
The action of keeping away from or not doing something.
That's right. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
And so, as always, before we jump into the episode,
we're going to make sure that you don't avoid your responsibility of giving our listeners a recap of an hour-long episode in 30 seconds. You think you're up for it?
Hey, maybe.
I think you'll be great. Are you ready for me to time you so that you got this?
Yeah.
Great.
I want you to make sure the timer's ready.
Listen, I'm always ready.
Okay.
On your mark, get set, go!
Zuko is upset that Aang escaped with his notebook. He's a coward, he said. What good is saving Wolf Cove if we don't save the world? Sokka and Katara have a little rumble over that while also getting some waterbending scrolls. Aang says goodbye to Gyatso, and Zuko goes to the Fire Nation port. And then we get to go to Kyoshi Island, which is fun. Zuko and Iroh visit Commander Zhao. Aang is hesitant to train, thinking of Gyatso. And Aang plays with Suki Aang plays, and Suki and Mom talk about things. And then there's a fight that breaks out, and then Kyoshi shows up.
Ding! Yeah.
So much of my favorite recap is, and then a fight broke out.
And then people fought. The end. Yeah. Well, this is fun. There's a lot that happens.
There is.
And
a lot of things that didn't happen.
A lot of things.
In the original.
Yeah, some new things. Yeah, we get some fleshed out lore again.
It's an adaptation.
That's right.
I have to remind myself
that was last episode.
Yeah.
Adaptation. Anyway, we're talking about avoidance today. What are you trying to avoid in your life?
Oh man, so much. But I can't. I have responsibilities. Try to avoid capitalism.
Ooh, good
That's
luck.
that's.
I'm avoiding capitalism by making my own oat milk
Oh my
now.
gosh, that's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I'm still deciding whether it's worth it because it does take a
Time,
little bit of
a
time.
little bit of
But
time.
anyway, we'll find out.
That's always like the demarcation of like, is it worth it or not? It's like, well, I'm saving money, but it also took me 48 hours to do it. So
Yeah,
was it just worth the $5?
yeah. It's hard
I
to
don't know if
tell.
the answer is yes.
I mean, if you have the ability to plan and mitigate that, then it is kind of worth it. But
So what about what was a moment of avoidance for you in this
in the episode,
episode?
okay, yeah, okay, great. Um, so I noticed a lot of people using fear, and this is kind of the same thing again, similar to our last conversation with adaptation, right? The reason people adapt was thinking about fear and safety.
Yeah.
This is the same thing that felt true with avoidance. Like people avoid things because of the anticipated danger of
Hmm.
not. And so I like Sokka going into oh, it's my duty as the person of the leader of the village as the village warrior, and using that as an excuse to not like as a way to avoid being vulnerable in front of
Yeah.
Suki,
Hmm.
right? Here's all these things that I actually am that he's not. And then every time she calls him on it, he's like, "Oh, but here's another reason why." And so this continued avoidance of vulnerability is really interesting to kind of watch progress throughout the episode.
Yeah. And I think it's weird. Sometimes multiple things can be true, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Why aren't you at your village if you're the protector of it? Is a very fair question for someone who's never
Yeah.
left Kyoshi Island. When Sokka's answer could have been and wasn't, oh, because if I don't help Aang save the world, then
Which
my island won't exist, or like my
yeah.
cove won't exist.
Yeah.
It's a very real answer.
But I think what it does is it shows that Sokka wasn't thinking about it from that perspective.
Right.
He was using it as a
I'm
way
the
to
leader
cover
of.
something else.
I'm the leader.
And
Look
so
at me.
I think that if he was confident about that, he would have said, "No, this is the right thing to do because protecting the world is going to protect the village." But he wasn't in that headspace, right? He was using it as an avoidance tactic, and so that completely changed his response. And so I think oftentimes we get caught in the, "Oh, well," and then later realize what we could have said. And I realize this within myself a lot is I say things, I'm like, "Oh, I know this is the right reason, but I don't know how to say it out
I
loud."
didn't verbalize it
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I just think we see Sokka do that a lot. So, that was something that I noticed
See,
for
there's
sure.
there's definitely the idea that Sokka is avoiding feelings,
For sure. Yeah.
feelings of inadequacy,
I think that's a lot of it.
feelings of not being good enough.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna rumble with that feeling because it's uncomfy for me to rumble with. Um, because like he's enough, but is he a better warrior than Suki?
No.
No. How a fan cut through so many
Melon,
melons.
like that was wild.
Suki, the real melon lord.
That's ooh, I love that. Suki the Melon Lord has got to be something we take advantage of. Oh,
Uh,
that's so good.
but very like I think there's how often does that happen where I'm not willing to rumble with the fact that I may not be as good as I want to be at something,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that comes off in me fabricating what I am, what I think people want to see from me,
Mhm.
and it's not even that they do, and it's not that holds meaning to Suki.
Mhm.
Like there's a chance that him being the leader of his tribe means nothing to Suki.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he thinks it will because he thinks that brings him value. And the reality is
Mm,
that there's value already there,
that's a good point.
but he's avoiding the icky feeling that comes with rumbling and getting to that point.
Well, I think that's the hard thing when we think about people who often come across as like super egotistical and cocky and arrogant is Sokka was the best warrior in his village, right? Sokka was the top dog. He was the one who was doing all of these things and teaching all of these other people and looking after his whole village. And then he comes to this place and all of a sudden he sees that all of those skills are woefully inadequate compared to what he perceived to be someone who was not as good to be a warrior because of their gender, right? And that's really interesting, right? But we see that he's again using last episode's lens, willing to adapt to learn from Suki and put put gender aside. And it's really interesting again how flexible and adaptable he is. And I just think that's a really admirable trait.
Just the willingness to be coached by Suki.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, if I'm walking away with anything, there's so many times where I want people to know that you think of people who feel like they need to behave a certain way to show they're good enough. And I think the reality is you're enough. You don't need to do it. Just be kind and you're enough. You don't have to try to peacock or anything else to show that you have value. You've got value. And lean into it. Once you lean into that value, you're going to actually show up better in the spaces that you're at.
Yeah. The other side of it is I want to talk about Suki. And, one of the things I really admire about Suki is every time that Sokka postures, right, or peacocks, and to use your language, anytime he tries, she's like, okay, I'm going to call him out on it.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, I'm going to call him out on it. And she doesn't let him avoid the conversation.
And it's because it doesn't feel in the episode that it's coming from a place of, I'm trying to one-up you.
Correct.
From Suki, it comes from a place of, oh, curiosity.
Yeah.
You're the leader of your tribe. Why are you here?
Yeah.
Not like you're the leader of your tribe. Why are you here?
Oh.
Right? And but how easy is it when you are perceiving that you're not enough or you're unwilling to rumble
to take that as a personal attack?
It as a personal attack when it's not. And so I think that when you do the work to kind of rumble with that and not avoid that conversation, you're also in a better place to receive what could be considered conflict in a way that is very easy to process and navigate.
Well, I think it's a really good tactic in general, right? I think that one of the things that we kind of work on and have worked on when we've done our prior episodes is thinking about what happens when you have someone who is really egotistical, really cocky, or really says inappropriate things. You say, "Did you mean to say it this way?" What, right? And just
did you mean to come off this way?
Yeah, and calling that out and bringing it up and forcing them to reckon with what they did, rather than letting it slide under the table and avoiding the issue or beating around the bush. And addressing things head on, turns out, while it's uncomfortable, is a very good tactic. And I think Suki does a really good job of consistently holding him accountable in a way that, I think that's part of the reason they become so close and he admires her so much, is that he's not willing to put up with his posturing. So I thought that was a really good tactic to display in the face of that.
Yeah.
Sweet. What else?
There's a few moments worth lifting up. And one of the biggest ones that pops up to me is I don't want to train. I used to only train with Monkey Otso, and I don't think I'm ready to train.
Yeah.
And the idea of it's okay, we'll do this together, which is what Katara's line to him is sometimes exactly what we need.
Yeah.
Is no, we're not going to avoid it, but you're not alone. And I think the concept of you not being alone, you're not the first person who's probably gone through these feelings.
Yeah.
You're not the last person who's ever going to go through these feelings. And it's okay to go through it with someone is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting moment, too, because what is he avoiding, right? Because right now, what it feels like he's avoiding the training out of respect for Gyatso is the way it comes across.
Either or I've never had another teacher.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I'm going to like that.
Yeah, avoiding the anticipated, oh no. Because I think what we also see is his reflections on when he did train before that he caused harm, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really beautiful perspective, right, of him avoiding his power. Whereas in the original, it was just firebending that he was scared of, and we saw why. We saw him make mistakes and burn Katara in the original. But what we see in this one is it's not just firebending that he's scared of. He's scared of his power, generally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes it really interesting to kind of think about in the context of
The,
airbending and being a master, right?
the last, it's because it wasn't just like I kind of hurt someone or like people didn't like it because I was too good at airball. It was
Yeah.
I almost sent 2 airbenders over
Off
cliff.
a cliff. Yeah, it's like it was dangerous. And the fact that I think there's an element, again, it's out of fear and out of safety. I don't want to train with someone else because can they handle, like, not in an egotistical way, but can they handle this me testing out my limits and my power?
Which also wraps up to the failure, right? The fear of failing
Yes.
itself. So not only can it doesn't have to be to the extent of I fail so bad that someone dies. Sometimes just the fear of failure,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you think that so much is on the line, means I'm unwilling to take that risk.
Yeah.
And what seems as very low stakes, waterbending in a river.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, what if what is the same equivalent is if I cause a flood and drown you
Yeah.
because I have no idea what this power is.
Mm-hmm.
In the avatar state almost hurt you last time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is yet.
Well, and it's really interesting because when like one of the things that we, for many of our returning listeners, will know that we both have worked with in youth development and worked with camps where we teach about gun safety. And I think about gun safety, and like a gun in the hands of a 5-year-old is a potentially very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
But if you have the trainer and the safety measures in place, it's one of the safest activities in the world. And so it's really interesting to think about bending safety and gun safety as an interesting parallel, right? If we are prepared to train and teach and guide and mentor in a way that's going to limit the like harms that can be done, then it's going to be something that is safe to train. But if you don't have that, it can be dangerous, right? People can get harmed, people can get hurt, people
Incredibly
can die,
dangerous, yeah.
right? And so it's just treating it and giving it the respect it deserves.
Also,
right?
want to be clear, we were giving 5-year-olds BB guns.
BB guns, yes, pellet guns sometimes even. So,
and that is the extent of what was happening at camp.
yeah.
But yeah, what are the safety measures that you're able? But you can't figure those things out sometimes until you do, right? Like you talk to experts, you get those things, and so the idea, Katara's like, oh, the Northern Air Temple, what a wonderful place for you to learn waterbending. Is like probably true. It's probably a safer place with people who have more experience in teaching.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a better place for Aang to learn, at least with his current knowledge base and without us assuming what's going to happen there in the future.
Absolutely.
The avoidance of letting new people in.
Yeah, Suki's mom
is very real.
Yeah.
And timely and
Yep.
But again, are you making decision? What's the value that you're using to make your decision?
Well, it's also interesting too because she's proven right in this episode, right? She let a stranger in, and ultimately that led to the Fire Nation showing up and a battle ensuing, right? Like, it's one of those things where that rule, this is not the exception that is like, okay, it's totally fine to let people in. This was exactly the thing that they were trying to avoid.
Which is interesting, though, because it's not... The choice to attack is that of the Fire Nation.
Mm-hmm.
They are using this as an excuse to do it,
Yes.
Aang's arrival.
Yeah.
But the choice to still attack for Aang being there is on the Fire Nation.
Yeah.
Not on you bringing Aang in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can kind of corral yourself, well, if I wouldn't have done this, they wouldn't have done it. But, like, they genocide an entire group of people.
Didn't matter what they did.
It didn't really matter what they did. And so I think that's kind of the other thing is how often do we avoid looking at a subject in a deep enough sense to figure out who's really at fault in this moment.
Well, and I think that's part of the issue is we have this like confirmation bias where, oh, if I had just kept him out, this wouldn't have happened. When in reality, that's not what made it happen, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're looking for this being the reason, you're gonna find reasons for it. But it's really much larger than that. And so I think what often happens when we're talking about our own personal lives and the rules that we set and the things that we abide by, oftentimes we misattribute the actual cause or stimulus or trigger or activation point that leads to it. And so really being aware of the things that are outside of us matters if we're going to make a reasonable logical conclusion around the actual reasoning behind these things.
No.
And it's just hard because, again, given their experience, this is what has kept them safe. So of course you're going to continue that behavior. But is that what's actually keeping them safe, or is it something else?
And again, it's what are you trying to survive? Are you trying to thrive? What's your purpose?
Yeah.
Right. The quote, "Ship is safe" isn't the harbor, but that's not what ships are meant to do.
Yeah.
But the back end of that is just because a ship's in the harbor doesn't mean that harm won't happen to the ship.
Yeah. Hurricanes, man.
Like, and so I think there's a little bit of this idea of, well, we need to protect Kyoshi Island for what?
Yeah. What's the purpose of the
And
island?
what is the point of an island if the rest of the world is burning around it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
oh, my personal safety. Well, that only lasts so long, and then you die, and then what? You feel like you accomplished the goal? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
It kind of made me think of just chess in general, right? You play more than
Mm.
I do, but arguably, let's say, I'm sure that it is an argument of what the most useful piece is.
Oh, yeah.
But
sure.
let's say it's a queen.
I would argue that that's probably true.
But if all you do with your queen is like
Keep it safe.
keep it near the king, you're probably going to lose that game of chess.
Yeah, Queen's meant to do a lot more than that.
So that's the other side of it is, Suki has this talent.
Sometimes you have to sacrifice the queen in order to keep your king alive.
And I think it depends what the purpose is, right? What's the point?
Yeah. Well, and I think what's really important, again, is we get a lot of change happening around, like, again, Adaptation was such a good starting lens because I keep on coming back to it. But it feels like Suki's mom adapts really well in this episode. We see her staunchly against this in the beginning. We see her grow to see why it is important and shift and change. She sees the relationship between Suki and Sokka, and she realizes what she's been kind of like holding her daughter back from by having this stance. We see her like have a different relationship with the Avatar and what that changes. Like the shifting and changing of characters in this show, and I think true to the original too, is what makes part of this show so good, is that people are malleable. And I think I just am, I got chills. It's just so big.
Mm-hmm. What about you? What's another moment of avoidance that popped up for you?
Let's talk about Kiyoshi like calling Aang out. Like this was big. Like
this would have happened faster if you would have gotten here quicker.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't try to freeze myself in the ocean for 100 years.
Yeah, she
outta here.
not letting Aang avoid anything. It's reeling out, like calling him out, and like in a way calling herself out. I should have been better. Like it was kind of self-deprecating in the way she phrased some of those things. But the idea that she is holding herself accountable by holding Aang accountable and not letting. Part of me is like this duality of I'm at once addressing Aang as an individual, but I'm also addressing the spirit that is me within you. And that's a really interesting thing and dynamic for me. And so part of me, this feels more digestible when I think she's partly talking to herself and beating herself up. The other part of it is the idea of I'm not going to let Aang avoid the like uncomfortable truth of what's happening in the world. And it's interesting because part of it is that Aang wasn't necessarily trying to avoid it. It's just that he had no idea. But she's like saying, I don't care about your feelings. I'm telling you what's up and you need to hear this.
Yeah.
Right? What are your thoughts?
There's some things that I would challenge Kiyoshi on.
Yeah, me too.
And the idea that you have to act without mercy is something that she says in that spiel.
Yeah.
And I think we have kind of grappled with this idea that you need to have the ability for balance.
It's both.
And sometimes it's both. And so to speak in such absolutes makes me go like, I typically avoid absolutes. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that as well is Aang as a 12-year-old shouldn't be taking on all the blame for not showing up. And you can urge him to be proactive in taking the steps to save the world.
Yeah.
Without making someone feel shame for something that was out of their control.
Yep. Agreed. Well,
it's almost like blaming Korra for losing the
how many times
the
can we bring
Avatar
this up?
second every episode. It's also not Aang's fault that he was trapped.
Yeah.
In an ice bubble for 100 years.
In fact, one would say that because it was the Avatar state, it's partly Kiyoshi's fault.
Yeah, it's your fault, Kiyoshi. And you know whose fault it is? Karuk. It's always Karuk's fault.
Yeah. Man. Anyway, so that was definitely a thing for me. Another one that I want to make sure we touch on is this is a really interesting moment for Zhao. We see Zhao being fleshed out in this episode. That is really interesting, and the idea of his, persona being given this very tentative, like falsely deferential Commander Zhao to Zuko is really interesting because it feels like he's avoiding. He's like, I want to figure out what's up, and I'm gonna avoid
the Agni Kai.
Yeah, I'm gonna avoid the Agni Kai. I'm gonna avoid being, I recognize that Zuko as the prince might have more of a rank than me at this point, so I'm going to avoid being in relationship with him and go around him in order to get the goodie, which is the Avatar.
Yeah, he plays very well afterwards, right? Like, we just heard there was a disturbance over there. It wasn't the Avatar that we were trying to find.
Exactly, yeah.
What a surprise to us, but we'll totally work in partnership with you.
Well, it's also brilliant at the end where Zuko's like, don't tell anyone. And Zhao's like, I'm going to use this to my advantage. Of course I won't tell anyone. This is the most important secret in the world. Ozai. Like, he sends the letter to Ozai,
and I
right?
think there's a little bit to the Zhao we get in the show is less thoughtful in terms of strat.
Yeah, exactly.
Me want Avatar. Me
take
go
Avatar.
Get Avatar.
Yeah.
Moonfish, right?
Yeah. Yarg! Jason Isaacs.
And so the idea that the Zhao has a little bit more political oomph, a little bit more is like kind of that shadiness of we know we don't like him, and we know, and as viewers of previous outlets, we know we shouldn't like him. And I like watching him dance.
Oh, I love it.
I like watching.
I really like the dynamic.
Him, even the way he shows up to Kyoshi Island is very kind of menacing, but very political. And even this idea of like, we were never going to be here because y'all were rather insignificant. And if it had stayed that way, like,
it could have been this way.
Super gaslighty in the most political
super
form
gaslighty
ever. And so I think it is a more interesting Zhao to watch.
I agree.
Show up in that space that way.
Yeah.
But the avoidance of I love the avoidance of truth is an interesting.
It's a tactic,
a moral question.
Yeah.
And when we've had conversations before, is truth inherently the best move? Like morally,
more ethical,
more like ethical. And in this moment, it's really a safety measure for Zuko and Iroh is to know we really shouldn't give the full truth because that could put us in danger. Versus sometimes we want to talk through things because maybe that's the better, like we're not going to really share all of the information is a very different tactic. And
well,
it's
also
one that I'm
like
considering like when you're lying to an oppressor.
Yeah.
That they're currently still a part of.
Well, it's also interesting
what's
too,
what's
right? Like, better for who, right? Like, when Zuko and Iroh are lying to Zhao, it's out of self-interest, not necessarily like worldly interest, right? What's better for the world? What is truly good and better?
Well, remember how we said it's interesting. Last episode we talked about how it's interesting. The more context and history you have,
Is it easier to
the
adapt?
better
Yeah.
you are able to adapt or give the most generous assumption in those moments. And like right now, that's kind of where I get to sit with Iroh because I've
Mm,
seen Iroh in 3 seasons previous to this,
yeah.
and that's the idea of like he doesn't really want the Avatar caught, and so is that his motivation for not wanting to tell Commander Zhao
Yeah.
what's up? However, why did they go to the port in general? And it's this weird balance that Iroh gets to play of what do I want Zuko? How do I pretend that I'm still supporting Zuko in this mission
Yeah.
while also like I don't want the Avatar caught?
Well, I want to go back to a moment in the prior episode because of that, which is like when Aang's in that cell on the Fire Nation ship, and Iroh's like, "Oh, the Avatar, let me talk to him," and they has this really candid conversation, and Aang asks him like, "Why is this happening?" And he's like, "Well, some people believe that
Yeah.
the best way to end the war is to kill you," and like, and then others believe, and you really don't get a sense of his actual thoughts.
Correct.
He's just a blatantly obvious in his answer, and not obvious, like honest,
Matter-
blatantly
yeah,
honest,
matter of
matter of
fact.
fact, bluntly honest. Answers the question, says, "Listen, I'm going to answer this question to the best of my ability,"
And is giving him that information, like tipping him off to be like, "Hey, this is serious.
Yeah,
People want you dead."
yeah.
Like,
Well, and it's well, like when I watched that, I was like, I can't tell if Iroh in this version what he really wants.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to like I think I can make deductions based off what the original does, but like
And we
in
don't
this
know.
version, I don't know what Iroh really wants.
turns out
here.
he's still the Dragon of the West and wants
Right? Like there's a part of me that seems like, well, he kind of still seems like he has significant Fire Nation tie. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I digress because that was last episode, but it is interesting to think about how that kind of honesty as a way to avoid the question was also true. And it's like a honesty of omittance instead of a lie of omittance, right? I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you the whole truth, but not what I think.
Yeah.
Versus, you know what I mean? I'm going to tell you exactly what is true, and I'm going to tell you what is like real, but I'm not going to tell you my thoughts on the subject. In the same way that I'm going to tell you all the things you need to know, but leave out the things that I think on the subject. And so it's an interesting play on avoidance. You can avoid with honesty, and you can avoid with lies. Turns out it's still avoidance.
Yeah. Any other big moments of avoidance that you saw?
I think the only thing left on my list is just something that was pretty small, but a big change from the original is Gran leaving the waterbending scroll to Katara instead of it being a pirate theft.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
I think it makes sense, right? Like in this situation, it makes sense why she didn't give it to her early on.
Avoiding giving it to her because of the danger it
makes
posed.
sense why she gives it to her now.
Yes.
It makes sense that she had it for all this time. As we kind of mentioned last episode, she's kind of the holder of culture for the Southern Water Tribe. And so, yeah, it was a change that was one that I was like, that felt like a smart move.
Yeah.
Like that felt like
Agreed.
a smart move from someone who didn't love the pirate episode.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it felt like in the original, it was the questionable thing. Like, would Katara have actually stolen this? Like, is that a real thing? But also, like, totally would, but also calls other people out later for it. And it's just like an interesting mix of questionable character development. But it's also like this really beautiful thing that gives us a full picture of a person. But this is a great way to kind of continue to lean and build up Gran's character and continue to build up her as a lore keeper and also give Katara access to this.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a neat avoidance point.
Yeah, as we kind of wrap up this section, I think for me, there's a line that Aang says, what if I hurt someone along the way?
Woof.
And then the response is, and I believe it's Kyoshi, because I believe this is when that happens in that conversation, is how many have you already how many have already been hurt because you haven't been here?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's what we talk when we're summing up avoidance. That's what we're talking about. What are you hurting your or like keeping yourself from?
Yeah.
But what is the long-term effect, or who's being hurt because you're not acting?
Yeah.
And I think that's
It's the argument of staying silent versus not
right.
like
Like that's the
when
idea.
you're silent, you're helping the oppressor kind of a deal.
And so, yeah, you can choose not to do this because one person may get hurt and you may mess up. And yeah, you may mess up. And is you messing up a little bit better than the outcome that would take place if you don't do anything at all? It's better to do some things imperfectly and learn than to not do anything.
And again, it's a matter of perspective, because if you're thinking about it individually versus globally, it's going to be a different answer. Like, what's better for you? It might be better for you to not say anything. But what's better for the world? It might be better for you to have done something and messed up.
Yep.
Right? And so really thinking about what is on the line for you, and whether you want to think outside of yourself or just within yourself, but also recognizing that if you do make the individual choice, that's okay, but you should know that that's what you're doing, right? Having the awareness to know why you're making decisions, so that you're not avoiding things out of a false sense of doing the right thing for the world when you're really acting for yourself.
What a wonderful place for us to pause.
Oh!
We're going to take a little break.
Oh!
And then we'll come back with our Twee and Law, our devotion, and our gratitude.
Oh, I love it. And we're back. Thanks for continuing to support by listening. We are so proud of the content we're creating and proud of you for listening. Thank you. We also have a Patreon. If you want to join, it's super cool. We have live episodes monthly still, and would love to hear from you. And thanks for coming. We're going to go to Tweet and Law now, thinking about things that push us away from the episode and pull us into the episode. So, thinking about that, what are some things that pulled you in?
No. I loved making the complete shift to a matriarchal society for Kyoshi.
Let's do it. I'm here for it.
Makes sense.
Yep.
And that also gave us the way that this character now is able to exist and kind of grow showed more depth than I think we had time for in the original. And so this format now has allowed for us to really flesh out that character specifically in a way that I thought was really well done.
Suki or Suki's mom?
Suki's mom.
Yeah. Apparently her name is Yukari according to all the sources online.
Okay.
But I don't recall that being said in the show.
Named in the show.
But anyway.
Maybe in the future, not in this episode.
Yep. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think that was a great change, personally.
And in general, again, more time with some of these side characters to give a little more depth to.
Yeah, just generally speaking, like Zhao, the change with Grands and the scroll, I think was a great move. I think seeing Kyoshi is a cool thing. We like seeing her was a big moment for a lot of people when that came out. I was like, whoa, we got to see Kyoshi, and that's just a really cool way to include her. So those are all things that kind of pulled me in.
Yeah. One thing something that didn't work for me is the story weirdly feels rushed. In my head, we've done the equivalent of about 6 episodes.
Yeah.
But we haven't, and it's felt really fast in terms of time frame.
Yeah.
And which is weird because we've arguably spent the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So for it to feel a little rushed, isn't playing for me as well.
One of the things I think people lose and forget is that oftentimes quote filler episodes do a lot of real work for character development, do a lot of work for helping us understand just the way characters interact. And at this point, by the time that we see a lot of the things that are happening in this episode, we have gotten some things have been more fleshed out. And so I think it's pretty valuable to have that time, even when it feels like there's not much happening in the episode. And it helps it feel less rushed because of those things too.
Yeah, the other thing that I would say that I'm at a point right now is that I don't like Aang. And not as an actor or anything like that, absolutely not. Just from the writing perspective, I don't. He's not fun to watch for me. He's not as engaging on screen. I He doesn't feel like a 12-year-old. We get a little glimpse of that when he's willing to go play with
When he's playing with the kids and flies into their statue and does
other than
the
that,
intro scene.
like, I'm at a place where, like,
seeing
the
more
fun,
of
the fun
Aang
side
laughing.
of Aang is non-existent.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
that is a take for this, which is not necessarily a wrong take. It is just a different take. And I'm not sure how I feel about it as of right now.
I mean, I could definitely do with more like Aang being goofy scenes for sure. I would be happy with that. That's a good point. The thing that I like feel torn about right now is the spirit world being, purple and blurry. Feels like I'm just like I don't know. And I get that it needs to be different in some way, and they had to make some sort of choice to make it feel like different than the physical realm. And I don't know how I feel about. I was like questioning, and like it just took me out of my head, and so that was something that pulled me out. We'll see how it continues.
How it merges.
Yeah, we'll see how it continues in future episodes. But that was something that was on my list.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, again, I'm in a similar place with the adaptation of it, just being like, I'm middle of the road on it right now.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, still able to pull some cool stuff out of it,
which is the whole point.
Isn't that cool though?
And I also like
it's the practice of doing this that's so cool.
And also, I think that's the way. Like, there's been such a binary response to just media recently.
Yeah,
it either is the best thing ever or it's trash.
Yeah,
and I think part of it is that those types of absolute statements gain traction.
Yeah.
For good and bad.
Yeah.
This is the best thing
it
ever.
earns people money
no,
too.
It's not, right? Like, so like it's engagement bait a lot of the times.
Yeah.
But then those are the only arguments that kind of get lifted up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reality is, like, you can pull things that you like and dislike from media.
That's right.
And it's okay.
Yeah. Turns out you can be a whole person.
It's not what you like or dislike. It's how you like or dislike that really becomes the issue.
I love it.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to move along and move into our next segment, which is our devotion. And we are devoted to improvement and devoted to becoming better and growing and learning. And part of the way we do that is by mastering all 4 elements. Last episode, we talked about water. This episode, we're talking about earth. And we're talking about earth combined with avoidance. And so we are setting an intention with those 2 things in mind. Tell me about an intention you're setting.
Yeah, my backyard's a wreck.
Okay.
And it's probably a bigger project. Like, if I was to really want to reshape it into the best
full landscape.
Full landscape.
Yeah.
It's a massive project. And so I think I'm avoiding it because of that.
Yeah.
When the reality is sometimes just doing something, me going and pulling a few weeds a week is going to be progress over the next 3 months.
Yeah.
As opposed to if I do nothing.
Yes, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
And I think that's where I think that is my analogy for both my backyard, but also like how am I navigating this upcoming week? What's the project that I'm avoiding? What's the conversation I'm just flat out avoiding?
Yeah.
And is it better to just
get out of the way?
Get out of the way. Do it in small chunks, maybe. What's the solution I'm looking for? And then let's just jump into it.
It's also remembering your favorite quote, which is to do a little bit on the front end saves you a whole lot of time on the back end.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. It's going to feel a whole lot better that way. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I'm, when I thought about Earth and avoidance, I was actually reminded of my devotion from last week, which was thinking about like how do I bolster those weak points in the water and build like walls to like bolster those specific spots and really kind of discerning where I need to build those. But also, I think what's happening is over my lifespan, I have built up walls and they have been erected for one reason or another
Mm,
to protect myself or to provide structure. And I think what I'm realizing is, sometimes when you're building a house, you want to, this wall doesn't fit, I want to knock this wall down.
right.
And recognizing, well, that's not a load bearing wall, it's no longer useful, let's remove it.
Yeah.
Right. And then I will recognize how much better I will feel when I take that wall down. And so part of me wants to like use this week to find one thing that I have been doing that is no longer serving me.
Yeah.
And so what is one thing that I've been doing that has become habit, that has become practice, that I'm less aware of, that I can cultivate attention around and begin to dismantle so that I will be more open and free to, have an open area in my house rather than a, you know, unnecessary wall that prevents airflow.
Right.
you know, that's what I'm thinking about.
I love that.
Yeah.
What are those little things that just aren't, they don't serve the purpose they once did?
Yep. Exactly.
And is it actually hindering me now?
Yeah. Because oftentimes they do.
No.
I don't want to be hindered.
No hindering.
No hindering.
No one likes the band Hinder. Lips of an Angel was terrible.
In the arms of
It's a different song.
angel.
Lips
What?
of an Angel and the Arms of an Angel.
Of an angel, I get a point.
That's fine, but I'm saying like those are two very different songs.
Well, yeah, one's Sarah McLachlan and talks about, puppies. Talking about puppies, we're going to talk about gratitude now.
I am grateful for my puppy.
Yeah, we like puppies. Gratitude, a character from this episode that, made us feel grateful for some reason, for something they did.
Yeah, side note, it was recently lifted up to me that I'm only ever like, oh, look at the cute little puppy if it's a dog that is over 80 pounds. Every other dog, I'm like, eh.
Yeah, itty bitty rat.
I was like, but we drove past like a 120-pound Mastiff on the road the other day, and I was like, oh, little puppy.
Little puppy. Casualties of living with a Mastiff.
And my partner was like, no. Big dog. I was like, oh, little puppy. Suki is my character I'm giving gratitude to.
Oh, what a great character to be grateful for. Yeah.
Again, there's so much to be said for just one, leading through curiosity and how that is almost feels like the just exact opposite of avoidance sometimes, right? It's I'm going to lean in, but I'm going to lean in good faith, and I'm going to lean in curiosity, and I'm going to not avoid this difficult subject like we're going to talk about it, is a skill that I wish I was just better at more often.
Yeah.
And I'm giving Suki all the gratitude for that. Also, I've seen what her fans can do, and I saw what that melon looked like afterwards.
It's a melon lord.
And that is impressive.
Yeah. I for very similar reasons, you mentioned that around Suki and this ability that you kind of admire. And I feel that I admire Suki's mom for the same reason that I admired Sokka in the last episode. Like this ability to reckon with the stance that you've held for so long, and then the willingness to change in the face of new information, in the face of new people and new experiences. I think that is just such an admirable thing, and I am a stubborn person. And so anytime I see people willing to change like that, it just like hits the right way for me. And her stance changing over the course of this episode is a lot for me. So I really appreciate that about her.
We love it.
Yeah, big fan.
We love it.
Fan.
Big fan. 2 episodes down.
2 episodes
6 to go.
down. Yeah. Very manageable.
Yeah.
Instead of 22. Right?
Again, yeah. 22 episodes. Especially, I'm glad we're not doing 3 times the length of our show.
Yeah. That would be a lot.
But yeah, excited to see what happens next. I think Hey Bye shows up at some point here soon.
Yep.
And I'm really going one at a time. I didn't go watch the whole series. And then
you're getting our, we're not getting the whole experience and then coming back. We're just getting some of it and
We're
then
just
coming
doing
to
it.
you.
No, that's right.
Yeah,
So,
amazing.
more lessons to be learned. I'm Sunshine.
And I'm Ben.
And this has been Bending Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.
Goodbye.